Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into the medieval mire, sailing across Imperial Russia and tracing painted pain through Mexico City. You'll relive centuries of filth, brilliance, and resilience, all tucked into a bedtime blanket of soft sarcasm and facts they don't teach in school. Let's kick off in the Middle Ages, where you, dear listener, would be lucky to survive a single sunrise. It's 1347, and your bed is a lumpy sack stuffed with damp straw, inhabited by beetles, lice, and one suspiciously squishy patch that might be mold, or worse. The walls around you are wattle and daub, the medieval version of drywall made of mud and manure. Your one window is a glorified hole, sometimes plugged with cloth in winter, but mostly just open to rats and smells. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this bedtime crew reaches across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push off the scratchy blanket and your feet land in yesterday's spilled gruel. Rats skitter away, revealing their latest excavation beneath the fireless hearth. You're already itchy from fleas, but that's less annoying than the gnawing ache in your stomach. Breakfast? It'll be stale bread soaked in weak ale. And yes, children drink the ale too. Water's dangerous and full of questionable floaty bits. Life as a peasant means endless labor and zero glamour. You're not the romanticized, sword-wielding knight or the corset-crushing princess of Hollywood dreams. You farm someone else's land, pay impossible taxes, and hope the local lord doesn't toss you into a dungeon for sneezing in his direction. The hierarchy is rigid. You're stuck. Let's talk clothes. You wear the same itchy tunic every day. No closet, no variety, no laundry day. That tunic might once have been your older siblings or repurposed from someone who didn't survive the last harvest. It smells like smoke, onions, and existential despair. Now you're out the door, straight into a sludge of animal droppings, human waste, and mushy cabbage leaves. Remember, cities don't exist as you know them. The market square is the beating heart of your village, and it's full of bartering, shouting, and the occasional pig wandering into your legs. You might try to haggle for a turnip or trade your chicken's egg for some waxed linen, but if you don't have something valuable, good luck. There's no dental hygiene, and if you chip a tooth on a dry biscuit, it's probably gonna fester. This is the era of chew with what's left dentistry. Fun fringe fact: some people tried brushing their teeth with crushed sage and salt. Others just didn't. Daily entertainment? Watching the local drunkard fight a goose. Maybe you'll see a jester if it's a festival, but mostly your amusement is watching your neighbors survive the mudslide that is the alley behind your hut. Occasionally, someone will tell stories around a fire, but they're more about demons and divine punishment than love and adventure. Historians still argue whether serfs had any genuine agency in this setup. Some say local communities created informal networks of support and resilience, while others insist the harshness and fatalism crushed all hope. Whatever the truth, your medieval morning definitely isn't winning any awards for comfort. And in case you're wondering, yes, if you're a woman, life is even harder. You clean, cook, care for kids, and still join the field work. Rights? Practically none. And if you say too much, the church might decide you're possessed or a witch. Cheery times. Now the sun creeps up, your neighbor yells about their missing goat, and you trudge toward another day of toil beneath a sky that's probably raining, but might also just be weeping for you.
You're standing at the edge of your patchy field, squinting at turnips that never asked to be this tragic. Life as a medieval peasant isn't just tough, it's an exhausting loop of hungry mornings, aching afternoons, and uncertain nights. You hoe the same soil your grandfather did, praying it coughs up enough food to keep you alive through the winter. Spoiler alert, it won't. Your fingers are raw, nails packed with dirt, and your joints creak like an old wooden cart. You're not sure if it's arthritis or just the universe saying, nope. And this isn't the back-breaking labor for a personal harvest. It's for your feudal lord, who gets the largest share, whether it's turnips, wheat, or a mildly successful cabbage. You nibble the leftovers and try not to resent his shining horse named Justice. Oh, and don't forget the tithe, 10% straight to the church. That loaf of bread you just begged for, God's slice comes first. Then there's the mill tax, the bridge toll, the market fee. By the time you get through all your financial obligations, your coin pouch is emptier than the village lost and found after plague season. Speaking of which, your village isn't immune. Disease sweeps in often, uninvited, and unmerciful. The Black Death is looming nearby, and you've already heard whispers. 3 coughs and you're cursed, someone muttered last week. Your cousin tried to wear onions around his neck for protection. He's still coughing. Now, let's talk politics, because you're tangled in it whether you know it or not. Kings war with each other like bored kids playing chess with real lives. When they need fresh soldiers, conscription comes fast and brutal. One moment you're trading chicken feathers, the next you're handed a rusted blade and told to defend a castle built by someone richer than God and twice as pompous. Historians still argue whether conscripted peasants understood what they were fighting for or if it was just blind obligation mixed with fear. You might have hoped for social mobility, but that's a fairy tale. Your parents were peasants, your children will be peasants, and the cycle grinds on. There's technically a legal system, but it's more likely you'll be fined for stealing bread than the Lord will be for stealing your freedom. And yes, stealing bread can get you maimed. Your local magistrate once sentenced a man to lose his ears over pumpkin theft. Light-hearted tidbit for your bedtime brain. In parts of medieval France, they held animal trials. Pigs, goats, and even cows were occasionally charged with crimes and put on trial. One pig was sentenced to death for eating a child's face. Really, the executioner wore gloves. Your day ends, finally, at sunset, when you collapse beside your fire pit. It's not cozy. Smoke curls into your lungs, your shirt is crusted with sweat, and you can't tell if the dog beside you is snoring or just wheezing from flea bites. Your stomach is still rumbling. You consider whether to eat the last root in the cupboard or save it. You save it because winter is always looming like a very cold landlord. If you're lucky, there's bread. If not, it's pottage. Basically, everything soft you could mash into a stew. Some days you scavenge acorns or boil nettles for vitamins. That's not culinary creativity, that's pure desperation. Religion gives some solace, but mostly guilt. Tomorrow is a saint's day, which means fasting, more hunger, more prayer. You wonder if heaven takes pity on poor folks. Someone said they saw a miracle last spring, but the priest says it was just wind. Your body aches, your head is buzzing, and your dreams are likely to involve falling into a vat of spoiled mead, or being chased by angry geese again.
You step outside into the sour morning air, and the first thing you smell is everyone. It's not just you. The entire village smells like a medieval soup of sweat, smoke, cabbage, and dung. Hygiene isn't a lifestyle here. It's more of a vague concept whispered about in monasteries. Soap exists, but it's expensive, and usually reserved for the wealthy or the priest who secretly hoards rose-scented chunks. You haven't bathed in weeks, maybe months. The closest you get to washing is standing in the rain and scrubbing your arms with sand. Your hair? Greasy and matted, probably home to 3 lice families and their extended cousins. Clean water is scarce, and you bathe about as often as you see a comet. When you do, it's in a wooden tub with water that's been used by your siblings first, then your parents. You go last. Congratulations, enjoy the backwash. And deodorant? Not invented yet. You might rub herbs under your arms if you're fancy. One quirky tradition from medieval Germany, people wore bouquets of lavender or rosemary pinned to their clothes, hoping the pleasant scent would mask the stench. Some folks stuffed dried flowers into their sleeves or pockets like medieval air fresheners. It didn't help. Your breath, dear listener, is equally questionable. Dental hygiene is non-existent. Toothbrushes haven't made their grand entrance. Some people chewed twigs or rinsed with wine. You, most days, just hope nobody gets close enough to notice you smell like turnips and despair. Historians still argue whether people of the era truly cared about their personal scent or whether collective stink just dulled the senses over time. Now imagine the social gatherings. Everyone stinks, so nobody complains. You meet at the tavern, sloshing weak ale into your mouth while ignoring the mold growing on the wooden walls. The ale isn't refreshing, it's warm and a bit chunky, but it's safer than water, which is full of things that may or may not be visible, but will definitely make you regret drinking it. Clothing? The same wool tunic every day, probably damp from the previous night's rain. You wear underclothes if you're lucky, but most people consider airing out the only real solution to feeling fresh. You dream of silk, but settle for burlap. Even the Lord's garments, though fancier, are sweat traps under all that velvet and fur. The streets are worse. No plumbing, no drainage. Waste from chamber pots gets tossed out the window with a shout of "Gardez l'eau" if you're polite, though many folks don't bother warning. You sidestep a fresh splash with reflexes honed from lifelong dodging. Your shoes? Made of leather so stiff it chews your heels, offering zero defense against the puddle of mystery liquid you just waded into. The animals aren't helping. Chickens run free, pigs wander the alleys, and your neighbor keeps a goose with anger issues that hisses whenever you pass. Fleas and flies are constant companions, and you've accepted that rats probably sleep closer to your bed than you'd prefer. Entertainment is minimal, but tonight there's a gathering at the village square. A wandering bard sings a tale of love and betrayal, laced with references you don't understand, but the lute is soothing. You sit beside someone who smells exactly like smoked onions, which is weirdly comforting. Laughter rings out when a drunk villager trips over a bucket.
It's not glamorous, but for a moment, the stench fades into background noise, and life feels almost tolerable.
Your hands are throbbing. A rough splinter from yesterday's rake is now an angry red lump on your palm, and it's starting to ooze. That's not ideal. But you're in the Middle Ages, where healthcare ranges from medieval dream catching to bleeding out while someone prays beside you. Welcome to the land of superstition, leeches, and hope wrapped in herbal compresses. You shuffle over to the village healer, a wiry old woman named Maud with 3 teeth and 8 opinions on goose fat. She inspects your wound, mutters something about humors, and grabs her pouch. Out comes a collection of dried herbs, a hunk of honeycomb, and, why not, a leech, fat and wiggly like your ex's lies. She places it on your hand and tells you to breathe. You do. It doesn't help. Medicine here is based on ancient Greek theories. You've got 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, and disease is their way of saying they're out of whack. The treatment? Purge, bleed, or sweat it out. That splinter infection might mean too much blood. Time to drain it. It's medieval logic. Just smile and nod while the leech does its creepy dance. Fun fringe fact: some physicians claimed that lunar phases affected surgery outcomes. No cutting during a waxing moon. Or maybe that was just an excuse to delay the inevitable. Now, if you were richer, you could visit a monastic hospital. The monks might chant over you, apply ointments made from wine and ashes, and possibly write your symptoms on parchment. But you're poor. So Maud's wildflower tea and the local priest's blessing are your best shot. Historians still argue whether folk healers knew more than university-trained doctors. After all, Maud's remedies didn't involve sawing off limbs without anesthesia. Your neighbor once got a hot needle treatment for a boil. It worked, mostly. Now he winks weird. Disease isn't just personal, it's community-wide. Coughing spreads like wildfire. You hear rumors of plague up north, people dying in hours, black spots blooming on their skin. There's no vaccine, no prevention. You start tying garlic to your doorway and hope it wards off evil. Garlic does nothing, but hey, it smells better than most people. Let's talk childbirth, equal parts miracle and roulette. Women give birth at home, on straw pallets, surrounded by midwives, prayers, and folk charms. Mortality rates are sky high. If the baby lives, it's swaddled tight, baptized fast, and maybe named after whichever saint you're least annoyed by. If the mother lives, she gets soup and a nap. And mental health? Not even a thing. If someone speaks to trees or weeps uncontrollably, they're touched by the devil or suffering from melancholia. You don't talk about feelings. You dig ditches and hope they go away. A local priest says confession heals the soul and thus the body. You try confessing your sins, stealing onions, mocking your cousin's haircut, but you still feel awful. Maybe it's the open wound. Maybe it's society. Maybe it's the rat currently nibbling your boot. Evening falls and your fever spikes. You curl under the itchy blanket, sweating like you've insulted every saint in existence. You dream of clean clinics, sterile gauze, and Tylenol. Instead, you wake to Maud whispering, "Let's try the cabbage poultice again." You groan.
Just one day without medieval medical mystery would be nice.
Your legs ache as you shuffle down the muddy trail leading to the Lord's estate, the oversized stone house that looms like it's judging your entire existence. Today's task? Forking hay, patching fences, and maybe mucking out the stables if someone decides they hate you. It's your feudal obligation, which is code for unpaid labor, serving someone who bathes in rosewater and eats roast duck while you gnaw boiled weeds. He's the Lord, and you're the serf. You owe him work, taxes, loyalty, and whatever's left of your sanity. In return, he lets you live on his land. Generous, right? You pass through the outer courtyard, careful not to trip over Lady Margaret's decorative goat. Inside the estate, it's lavish, but also weirdly damp. Tapestries hang from cold stone walls, and someone's pet falcon shrieks every hour right on cue. A servant tells you to muck the barn. You nod, not trying to sneeze near the Lord's prized hunting hound named Valor. That dog has more freedom than you. The class system is rigid. Lords rule with absolute authority, dispensing justice, taxes, and disapproving glares. You can't refuse orders. That's punishable. Some peasants were even legally tied to the land. They couldn't leave without permission. Historians still argue whether the feudal system was born of necessity or pure oppression. Either way, you're not exactly thriving. You work all morning, and someone brings bread for lunch. Cold, hard, and probably stolen from the chapel kitchen. You eat fast. The steward watches like you're a fox in the henhouse. You ask for water. He laughs. He says, "Drink from the trough." Charming. After lunch, it's wheat counting, making sure the right amount goes to the Lord's granary. You're not trusted with math, so someone double-checks every bundle. You once rounded up instead of down. They docked your work hours for a week. Odd fact, some lords owned jesters whose job was literally to insult everyone while juggling. And somehow that's still less degrading than your job counting wheat that doesn't belong to you. Your afternoon task involves digging a new hole for the estate's latrine. You hold your nose, scoop the muck, and wonder how life ended up like this. You think about running away. But where? Bandits roam the forests, and towns aren't exactly welcoming. One traveler was beaten for staring suspiciously at the mayor's goat. You finish the day just as the sun sets. You're dirty, tired, and bruised from a horse kick you didn't deserve. As you leave, the Lord's son rides past, flicking his golden braid and shouting, "Peasants are hilarious!" His horse is named after his sixth wife. You don't ask why. You stagger home. On the way, you spot Maud brewing something over a fire. "Need a poultice?" she asks. You wave her off. Tonight, you just want to sleep and not dream of decorative goats or latrine holes. Still, you know tomorrow brings another day of feudal fun. At least it might not involve sheep herding. Maybe.
You stumble back into your damp cottage, sore from hauling hay, and emotionally bruised from being called fungus foot by a knight in training, who was probably raised by swans. But tonight, your mind drifts towards something deeper than hay and hygiene. God. And not in a joyful, inspiring, count your blessings kind of way. More in the will I burn forever because I forgot to kneel during Vespers sort of panic. Religion is everywhere, woven into the mud and misery, like invisible strings tugging at your daily choices.
From cradle to grave, your life is a divine performance. You were baptized as a baby to cleanse original sin. You confess sins weekly, like stealing oats or having jealous thoughts about Lord Valor's fur-trimmed tunic. The priest nods, sighs, and offers forgiveness if you promise to fast, pray, and maybe donate a chicken. Every corner of medieval Europe pulses with faith. Cathedrals loom like stone mountains. Bells toll to mark prayer hours, and saints are household names more famous than kings. Saint Cuthbert, Saint Agatha, Saint Everything. You know their feast days better than your birthday. Your evening meal might be skipped because it's a holy day of fasting. Your neighbor, Agnes, once tried to eat a sausage on a fast day and swore the village well dried up in protest. Of course, there's hell, glorious, fiery, eternal hell. You've seen it illustrated in church, monsters gnawing at sinners while flames tickle their toes. It's surprisingly vivid for something supposedly metaphorical. Historians still argue whether these apocalyptic sermons were more about genuine belief or controlling the unruly masses. Either way, you wake up scared and go to bed sorry. Tonight, you whisper prayers in Latin you don't understand. The priest says it works better that way. You clutch your wooden rosary, thumb each bead, and try not to remember that you accidentally lied about how many eggs your hand laid. Technically, it was 2.5. You fear purgatory, a kind of spiritual waiting room where your soul lingers in smoky limbo, while the living pray you into heaven. If no one prays hard enough, you stew there like spiritual soup. You ask your cousin to remember you when he prays. He forgets, frequently. The church isn't just about your soul, it's also about law, land, and politics. The village priest might own property, influence local court cases, and tax you separately from the Lord. You pay the church tithe because, well, who risks divine wrath over coins? Plus, the priest has access to books, which means he's practically a wizard. Here's a fringe tidbit for your bedtime archive. Some monks believed sneezing expelled demons. That's why "God bless you" became such a reflex, because your soul might have just done a barrel roll out of your nose. Still, there's comfort in faith. You light candles to saints, hoping they'll intervene. You join processions, sing hymns off-key, and feel united with the muddy flock you call a community. On feast days, there's dancing, sweetbread, and theatrical retellings of miracles involving cows. Miracles, cows, and incense, your spiritual trifecta. As you curl into your straw bed, you pray one last time, not for comfort, not for riches, just that you don't wake up midway through Judgment Day wearing yesterday's tunic.
You blink and everything changes. Gone is the stench of medieval filth and feudal hopelessness. Instead, you're surrounded by candlelit corridors, polished boots, and a language you don't recognize, German, tinged with the stiff formality of nobility. You've landed in the 18th century,
and the air smells faintly of starch, ink, and ambition. Welcome to the childhood of Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst, a girl history will one day call Catherine the Great. Your eyes adjust to the tidy drawing room of a modest estate in Stettin, neither castle nor cottage, but somewhere in between. Sophie's mother, Johanna, paces restlessly, dreaming of titles and court invitations, while Sophie studies maps and listens far too keenly when her tutors discuss politics. She's not your typical noble child. She's curious and unreasonably clever. She's 12 and already wondering why women aren't taken seriously in matters of state. You follow her through lessons on etiquette, French grammar, and the proper way to curtsy without looking constipated. But Sophie prefers Voltaire to needlework and secretly resents having to smile on command. Her father, a mild-mannered general, rarely interferes with her education, leaving Johanna to push her toward whatever royal match she can wrangle. And oh, Johanna is relentless, praising Sophie one moment and criticizing her posture the next. One quirky tidbit: Sophie practices smiling in front of mirrors, modeling her expressions after portraits of empresses she's never met. "Smile like you already rule," she whispers once. And honestly, it works. At dinner, the family debates alliances. Russia is mentioned. Big, cold, full of possibility. Peter, heir to the Russian throne, is an option. A strange one. He's awkward, petty, and apparently spends his free time pretending to be a Prussian soldier. Johanna lights up at the mention. Sophie blinks slowly. She knows marrying him won't be a fairy tale, but maybe, just maybe, it's a door. Soon they receive the invitation. Sophie will travel to Russia to meet Empress Elizabeth and see if she's suitable. You know what that means. She'll be scrutinized, judged, and possibly rejected for not being noble enough, tall enough, or Russian enough. As Sophie prepares, she studies Orthodox religion, rewrites her personality to match Russian court expectations, and even gets a crash course in surviving palace gossip. Historians still argue whether her transformation was sincere or purely strategic. Either way, she becomes fluent in Russian, changes her faith, and readies herself to meet destiny. You ride in the coach beside her, awkwardly dressed in borrowed silk, breathing the frost-bitten air as the carriage rattles toward St. Petersburg. Sophie hums under her breath, half anticipation, half nerves. She's leaving behind childhood, comfort, and almost everything she knows. Her luggage carries books, prayer beads, and exactly one portrait miniature of a pet dog who was never allowed inside. The palace gates loom. Inside awaits Peter III, Empress Elizabeth, and a lifetime of politics, power, and very inconvenient love triangles. You take a breath. The candlelight flickers, and Sophie straightens her spine. The girl who studied maps is ready to redraw them.
You step into the gilded corridors of the Russian court, and you're already sweating beneath your powdered wig, even though it's winter. The air hums with gossip, imported perfume, and the sound of silk shoes tap-tapping over marble. Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst has now morphed, officially, into Catherine. Not the Great yet. That title's waiting. First, She must survive her marriage to Peter the Third. And let's talk about Peter. He's the type of royal who salutes paintings and practices toy soldier drills while diplomats wait in his drawing room. He idolizes Prussia to an obsessive level, which would be adorable if he weren't the heir to the Russian throne. You, standing next to him, can't decide if he's misunderstood or just missing key cognitive pieces. Either way, it's not looking good for Catherine. The wedding is opulent, but emotionally vacant. Catherine wears silver thread and a practiced smile. Peter sulks. You march down the ceremonial hall with her, wondering if this is a royal love story or a prolonged hostage situation. Spoiler, it's the latter. Their private life is bleak. Peter is immature, volatile, and more interested in playing music badly than engaging in anything resembling intimacy or political partnership. Catherine keeps diaries, venting quietly while learning Russian court politics with stealth and speed. Historians still argue whether her writings from this time were emotionally raw or deliberately performative. But either way, they show a mind preparing to outwit the walls closing in. Fringe tidbit: Peter once declared his fondness for keeping rats as pets, not just any rats. He gave them military names and held mock trials. One rat was executed for treason. You watch, horrified and intrigued, as Catherine scribbles in her notebook. She's not content to be ornamental. She studies Enlightenment philosophy, reads political theory, and forges quiet alliances with courtiers who find Peter alarming. As her husband loses favor with Empress Elizabeth, who initially brought her to Russia, Catherine gains ground. She's composed, intelligent, and increasingly popular among those tired of Peter's antics. Behind the scenes, Catherine's strategic mind blooms. She avoids scandal, mostly, listens more than she speaks, and builds relationships with powerful nobles. Peter plays violin alone in his study, unaware that his wife is winning hearts and minds just down the hall. One courtier whispers, "She'd make a better ruler." Catherine raises an eyebrow and smiles, just barely. Peter becomes heir officially when Elizabeth dies, but the throne isn't a guarantee. Catherine knows his coronation could spell disaster, reforms rolled back, Prussian uniforms everywhere, and Russia destabilized. You sit with her as she weighs impossible choices. Divorce isn't an option. Escape is laughable. But one path remains: take power herself. She begins to plant political seeds. Loyalists grow. Peter becomes erratic, and the Russian court begins whispering about a coup. In the flicker of candlelight, Catherine exhales. Her marriage may be miserable, but her empire? That's just beginning. You wake to chaos. The palace is a buzz of whispers, swift footsteps, and the uneasy shuffle of political anxiety. Peter the Third has ascended the throne, but his crown is tilted, metaphorically speaking. The courtiers aren't smiling. The guards aren't cheering. And Catherine is plotting. Peter wastes no time undoing alliances. He praises Frederick of Prussia to the point of absurdity, alienating Russian officials who fought wars to keep Prussian influence at bay. You sit beside him as he bumbles through reform attempts, abolishing the secret police,
outlying some forms of torture, legalizing religious freedom. Noble goals if they weren't delivered with manic energy and zero tact. Meanwhile, Catherine walks corridors with practiced ease. She doesn't shout, she listens. She takes tea with generals, jokes with nobles, and notes who flinches when Peter's name is mentioned. You watch her carefully. This is no mere consort. This is a chess player carving out control. Peter makes his fatal mistake, ordering Catherine to leave the court. She's a threat, he says, too popular, too clever, too loved. Historians still argue whether Peter's paranoia was justified or simply self-sabotage. Either way, you feel the shift in the air. Catherine won't be dismissed. Not like this. On a steamy July morning, the coup unfolds. Catherine, in uniform, rides through the capital flanked by loyal guards. She declares herself empress. Peter, caught off guard and stripped of allies, flees to a palace hideaway. There's no battle, just a blunt exchange of titles. Days later, Peter dies under mysterious circumstances, officially natural causes, but history squints suspiciously. You ride with Catherine into the newly gilded age. Her coronation is elegant, bold, and peppered with knowing glances. She wears a crown that once seemed impossible, and the court bows deep, some out of awe, others out of sheer survival instinct. Now, Empress, she doesn't waste time. The government stabilizes. Military power strengthens. The economy groans into progress. Catherine reads political theory at night and governs with icy grace by day. It's not just charisma, it's competence wrapped in velvet and ambition. Odd fringe fact: Catherine established Russia's first state-run school for girls. Enlightenment? Check. Revolutionary? Definitely. Scandalous, according to some patriarchs. But Catherine doesn't flinch. She expands Russia's borders through wars and cunning diplomacy. She wrestles control of Crimea, struts through Polish politics, and makes treaties with empires that once snubbed her. You ride alongside her as she pens letters to Voltaire, debates Rousseau, and builds an empire of thought as well as territory. But whispers persist. She's too ambitious, some say. She's not Russian by blood, others mutter. Catherine sips her wine, arches a brow, and continues working. Her throne is no longer borrowed. It's built on the very foundation she reforged. You stand at the edge of a ballroom, watching her dance with grace, power, and the kind of precision that makes emperors nervous. Catherine the Great isn't just ruling Russia. She's rewriting what it means to be a ruler at all.
Now, the crown sits comfortably on Catherine's head, not just as a gilded ornament, but as a signal to the world. Russia belongs to her, and she's not wasting time. You follow her down the corridors of power where silk whispers and quills scratch. The court is bristling with expectation. Will she rule like Peter? Will she turn into Elizabeth? Or will she forge a rule like no one's seen before? Turns out it's the third option. Catherine dives into governments with the precision of a surgeon and the flair of a dramatist. She reads, reforms, and corresponds with every Enlightenment thinker she can catch: Voltaire, Diderot, Montesquieu. Her letters bounce between Russia and Paris faster than gossip in a palace hallway. She's enamored with the Enlightenment ideals: reason, education, equality. But she's also realistic. This isn't Versailles. It's vast, sprawling Russia, and ideology alone won't milk the cows or defend the borders. she launches the Nakaz, a sweeping legal document aimed at restructuring Russia's criminal code. It's packed with progressive ideas: no torture, equality before the law, in theory, and a jab at serfdom that makes noble brows twitch. Historians still argue whether Catherine truly believed in these reforms or used them as political theater to charm European intellectuals. Either way, they're impressive. Now, about Catherine's love life, oh boy, it's legendary, controversial, and deeply strategic. Her lovers aren't just arm candy. Many are political allies, trusted advisors, and chess pieces in her imperial game. She picks them smart and sharp. You meet one, Grigory Orlov, dashing and loyal. He helped her seize the throne. Another, Potemkin, brilliant and complicated, who once allegedly built entire fake villages to impress her during a tour. Historians call them Potemkin villages, an enduring nickname for overly polished facades. Catherine doesn't apologize for her romances. She enjoys passion and companionship, and she refuses to be shamed for it. That's revolutionary in itself. She's a widow, an empress, and in her view, sovereign of her own choices. One fringe detail for the bedtime archives: Catherine had a library of over 44,000 books and once ordered a mechanical bed with golden cherubs that played music when she reclined. Who needs Netflix? She also expands education, especially for girls. She builds schools, funds scholarships, and modernizes Russia's academic landscape. She supports art and science, imports architecture, and transforms St. Petersburg into a glittering intellectual hub. The Winter Palace glows under her patronage. But always, she balances reform with control. Serfdom persists. Dissent is punished. She's enlightened, but she's also pragmatic, and that pragmatism shows in every law and letter. You sip tea beside her, figuratively, as she drafts an edict with one hand and diagrams military movement with the other. Russia isn't just changing, it's evolving, and Catherine is steering the ship with velvet gloves and iron fingers. She walks past a fresco of herself, glancing up only briefly. It's flattering, yes, but it doesn't capture her mind. That's the real masterpiece.
You lean against a marble column in the sprawling Grand Kremlin Palace, watching Catherine the Great swirl through her era with a pen in one hand and a battle strategy in the other. Russia is transforming, and it's complicated. Catherine sees herself as an enlightened monarch, a ruler shaped by philosophy and practicality. But her legacy? Let's just say it depends on who's writing the history book. She continues expanding Russia's territory with sharp diplomacy and well-timed wars. The annexation of Crimea? Bold. The carving up of Poland? Ruthless and strategic. The nobles cheer, the common folk groan. Serfs remain shackled to estates, their conditions barely improved. It's enlightenment with an asterisk. Catherine's reforms sparkle in theory. She commissions schools, hospitals, libraries, even inoculations. Fringe fact: she publicly received the smallpox vaccine to encourage others. Yep, an 18th century royal PR move that involved a needle and a side of political boldness. You wince just thinking about it, but admire the guts. Still, there's a tension in the air. Catherine preaches freedom while ruling with absolute power. She promotes Voltaire while silencing dissent. Historians still argue whether Catherine was truly progressive or simply using Enlightenment ideals to mask autocracy. Some call her
a visionary, others a tyrant in pearls. The empire grows. Her image, carefully curated, becomes iconic. A benevolent ruler nurturing art, science, and order. You attend one of her salons, where powdered wigs and philosophical banter mix with subtle power plays. Catherine sits at the head, quoting Rousseau and sipping tea like she invented revolution. She didn't, but she understood its mechanics. You wander through the summer garden, watching statues glisten and poets toast the empress. Behind closed doors, however, whispers persist. Nobles worry about uprisings. Intellectuals side-eye her censorship. Rural peasants can't spell her name, but curse her taxes. Then comes the Pugachev Rebellion. A Cossack pretender claims to be Peter III and rallies thousands. He promises freedom from serfdom. You blink. This is serious. Villages burn, and Catherine sends troops. The rebellion is crushed. Heads roll, literally. Catherine tightens her grip. Reforms slow. Serfdom is reaffirmed. It's a chessboard, and she just sacrificed a few pawns to protect her queen. You feel the shift, ideals giving way to survival. She's not just ruling Russia, she's maintaining an empire stitched together with ambition and uneasy alliances. In her study, she pens a letter. I am a friend of mankind, yet I rule with iron. The candle flickers. You understand now. Catherine isn't a contradiction.
You wake beneath a sky dusted with color. Mexico City, early 20th century, swirling with murals, marketplaces, and revolution. The adobe warmth replaces imperial marble. The palaces fade, and in their place rise tiled houses with rooftops bursting with laundry and gossip. You're in the Coyoacan neighborhood, peeking into a lively household where a girl named Frida Kahlo is sketching shadows onto scraps of paper. Frida's world is different from Catherine's, but no less fierce. Her home is La Casa Azul, the Blue House, and it's buzzing with politics, poetry, and unexpected visits from intellectuals who drink coffee like it's performance art. Her father, Guillermo, a photographer of German descent, encourages her to read, observe, and question everything. Her mother, Matilde, is devout and rooted in tradition. A tension Frida will wrestle with for life. She's smart, bold, and always a bit of a spectacle. At school, she joins a radical group called Los Cachuchas, a student gang obsessed with revolution and pranks. You watch her prank a professor with a stolen goat, don't ask, then debate socialism over stale bread. She's 12 and already defying every rule. Historians still argue whether Frida's early rebellion was a spark from family politics or raw defiance wrapped in charm. Her health, though, is fragile. She contracts polio as a child. Her right leg shrinks slightly, and she walks with a limp she hides beneath long skirts. The other kids call her Frida the Peg Leg. She punches one of them hard and never apologizes. Fringe fact: Frida kept a pet deer named Granizo and a troop of mischievous monkeys, because why settle for one odd companion when you can have a jungle? By her teens, Frida wants to be a doctor. She studies science, anatomy, and politics, blending body and rebellion like paint on a palette. She's strong, opinionated, and full of dreams bigger than anyone realizes. But those dreams, they're about to crash, literally. You're walking beside her toward school when the sky changes. A bus screeches, metal bends, glass shatters, everything fractures. But that's tomorrow's story. Tonight, Frida still dances in the courtyard, a girl with wild eyes, red ribbons, and an unfinished destiny.
You're standing at a busy intersection in Mexico City. The year is 1925, and the sun casts long shadows across cobblestones and trolley tracks. Frida Kahlo, barely 18, boards a wooden bus with metal fixtures and wide windows that creak every time it turns. You're right there beside her, laughing at a corny joke a stranger told, eyes drawn toward the blur of market stalls outside. Then everything unravels. A collision. Metal meets metal with a vicious crunch. The sound isn't just loud, it's absurd, like two giants slamming pots together. The bus is shattered. Frida's body is thrown, twisted, pierced. An iron handrail impales her abdomen. Her spine is fractured in multiple places. Her clothes torn, her skin bloodied. Someone sprinkles gold dust on her, accidentally, from a craftsman's bag that spilled. She looks like a wounded saint. You rush to her. She's conscious, barely, and aware in ways that haunt her forever. Hospital life becomes a revolving door, surgery after surgery. Her body is a battleground, held together with plaster corsets and stubborn defiance. She stares at ceilings for months, sketching in her mind before her hands are strong enough to move again. Historians still argue whether that crash created Frida the artist or simply forced her art to become her medicine. Either way, she begins to paint. Her first works are personal, small, painfully honest. A broken column instead of a spine. Thorns instead of ribs. She paints lying down, the canvas hung above her bed like a cruel dream catcher. Odd fringe fact: Frida's hospital corsets were hand-painted to resemble military armor. She turned support into statement, pain into protest. She doesn't hide. Instead, she challenges the world. She paints her internal injuries with uncurring clarity. Blood, bones, medical straps, all displayed with surreal beauty. Her eyes in every self-portrait stare back as if asking, "Can you handle this?" You spend weeks with her in recovery, listening to her jokes, some dark, some biting. A nurse brings soup. She calls it paint water. Her father visits with books. Her mother brings prayers. Frida brings raw truth, painted in hues no one's ready for. Each brushstroke is rebellion. Her body refuses to bend to pity. It cracks, but never crumbles. You leave the hospital beside her, slower now, steadier, but forever marked. The accident didn't destroy her, it unleashed her.
You're curled into a faded armchair in La Casa Azul, watching paint dry, while Frida Kahlo sharpens her sarcasm and mixes crimson with cobalt. A letter from Diego Rivera sits crumpled on the table, half apology, half poetic nonsense. Their relationship, equal parts muse and mayhem, is about as stable as a weathered piñata hanging in a windstorm. And yet, it fuels her art, her fire, and sometimes her fury. Frida meets Diego in the wake of her accident during one of his colossal mural projects. She brings a few paintings to show him. He stares too long, nods slowly, and says, "You've got something?" You smirk. So does she. It's the beginning of everything, and arguably a slow descent into glorious chaos. They marry. She's 22, he's 42. She's 5'3". He's a bear. People call it the union of an elephant and a dove, which isn't exactly flattering, but definitely memorable. You tag along to their reception, where Frida drinks tequila, dances barefoot, and recites revolution poetry between bites of spicy mole. Everyone's watching her. Diego is mesmerized. The next day, they argue. It won't be the last time. Their life is a whirlwind of studios, scandals, and political salons. You sit in meetings with Trotsky, hear whispers of communism, and sip bitter coffee while Frida sketches caricatures of men she doesn't trust. The walls of La Casa Azul become a canvas for both ideology and intimacy. Diego paints grand statements. Frida paints quiet truths, raw, vulnerable, defiant. One fringe tidbit: Frida once sent Diego a cake for his birthday shaped like a foot, mocking his latest infidelity and her own ongoing medical saga. Savage and sweet. The love between them is volcanic. She worships him. He cheats. She cheats. He apologizes. They separate, reunite. Their fights are legendary. Their letters painfully poetic. Historians still argue whether their connection was toxic, transformative, or both. You read one of Frida's diary entries, ink bleeding around the edges. Diego, nothing compares to your hands, your eyes, your voice. Her pain from the accident never fades, and Diego both comfort and complicate her healing. He builds her a bathroom altar. She throws one of his shirts into a fire. They tour the U.S. together, and Frida quickly tires of skyscrapers and polite racism. She prefers Mexico's texture, its stories, its stubborn soul. In her art, their relationship is immortalized in vivid contradiction. Frida and Diego Rivera, 1931, shows them as mismatched equals, and later works reveal her heartbreak like anatomical studies. One painting, The Two Fridas, splits her in half. One Frida with Diego's portrait, the other bleeding from a severed artery. It's not just metaphor, it's biography. You catch Diego staring at a new canvas. Frida's eyes seem to follow him wherever he walks. He whispers, "No one paints pain like her." You nod. Then she adds a monkey to the scene, just to mess with him. Their love is messy, brilliant, and deeply stitched into every inch of her legacy. And tomorrow, her revolution begins.
You're standing in Frida Kahlo's studio as twilight slips across the tiles of La Casa Azul, casting golden streaks onto a canvas still wet with emotion. Her hair is braided with ribbons, her lips painted red, never subtle, never afraid. The pain clings to her spine, her pelvis, her lungs, but she paints. She always paints. The final years of her life are a flurry of fragility and fire. Her health declines dramatically. Surgeries mount. Her right leg is amputated. She jokes about it, writes poems to it, and then paints herself dancing with skeletons. You sit beside her wheelchair as she sketches outlines of flora, portraits of herself in agony, and political symbols that blaze against the backdrop of injustice. Her activism deepens. She joins communist rallies, protests American imperialism, and hosts revolutionaries with a plate of mole and a side of poetry. Historians still argue whether her politics overshadowed her art or amplified it. Either way, her defiance resonates louder than ever. Fringe fact: in her final days, Frida demanded that a mirror be mounted above her hospital bed so she could finish one more self-portrait. Her eyebrows arched with urgency. Her eyes still questioning everything. Diego watches helplessly as she fades. He hangs her paintings in galleries, speaks her name with reverence, and admits, "I never truly left her." You observe their final goodbye, wrapped in tears, tobacco smoke, and unfinished promises. Frida dies in 1954. Her funeral becomes a riot of color and sorrow. Her casket is adorned with flowers. A red communist flag blankets her body. The world says goodbye to a woman who never softened her edges for anyone. Then something strange happens. People begin to wear her image. Museums mount exhibitions. Artists cite her as influence. Her diaries are published, her letters dissected. The myth grows, not because it's exaggerated, but because she lived fully in her truth. Today, she's not just an artist. She's a symbol of resilience, of rebellion, of red lipstick and broken spines, and saying exactly what you feel. You walk through the Frida Kahlo Museum in Coyoacán. Her brushes sit beside sketches. Her bed is still there, her wheelchair, her corsets painted with fire. You trace your fingers across the cool surface of her work and whisper, "Gracias, Frida." In the end, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be unapologetically you. The night wraps you gently now, like a canvas stroked with muted blues and silken grays. You've wandered through damp medieval huts, gilded imperial corridors, and painted Mexican courtyards, and yet, somehow, you're still here, quietly nestled in the safety of your own time. Let the heavy fog of history dissolve into soft mist. The lice, the leeches, the betrayals and revolutions, they're stories now, distant echoes pressed between the pages of time. You're not trudging through mud or waiting for letters from Voltaire. You're curled up, breathing evenly, letting your heart beat slow to a steady, comfortable rhythm. Catherine's empire sleeps in shadows. Frida's paintbrush rests in its jar. The medieval rat finally found peace beneath the floorboards. Tonight, You felt the weight of crowns and corsets, of broken bones and unbroken spirits. You've traced the arc of resilience through centuries, how even in the worst conditions, people found ways to think, love, and create. So close your eyes, let your muscles soften, and picture the stars, Frida's moon above her courtyard, Catherine's skies stretching across the steps, and even that flicker of starlight peeking through a medieval chimney. You are safe. You are still. And while you definitely wouldn't last a day in some of these eras, you've survived tonight's history lesson just fine.